Hello, and welcome to another episode of, I guess, still killing the church for now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did we even decide if we're changing the name or not?
We'll end up changing the name at some point when I guess we'll start a whole new series on topics that are not killing the church.
We'll probably
I
keep
don't know,
killing the
unless I
church
can figure out a way to do it with this one, like we did with the Nida special. That'll be released later. Some of you guys missed that.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
But that one started out not killing the church, and then I made it killing the church. And
yeah, it didn't last.
It was
long.
awesome.
Killing the church will still be a thing. It just it likely won't. It'll be its own particular. Anyway, so welcome to another episode. We're talking about Pesach Sheni, or the second Passover, more or less, and making sure I sound okay. Welcome. And once again, thank you to our Patreon, top tier Patreon supporters. Really appreciate all you guys do. We've actually been able to add a name to this list down here. This one was interesting because he had to pay us in the British pound sterling.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It was cool, but also a little bit like, it was like, oh man, it was kind of a weird reality.
We've now
check
broken the international market.
Well, because it was like, yeah, payment processed, 19 pounds sterling, and I was like, wow, it's a top tier. It's a top tier support, but it's only 19 in British pounds. Like, geez, the dollar sucks right now. But yeah, so let's get the music going. Let's get rid of that. Let's bring us back up, and boom, overlay.
Ooh,
there we go.
There's a good question already. 4 Roses or Tin Cup, which one shall I drink? I'm gonna recommend 4 Roses because that so far is my favorite bourbon. But this Angel's Envy is making me reconsider that. So it's also very good.
I'm having coffee right now. I've had a very tired day, so I'm having just drinking some coffee. After I finish, I'm about halfway through it already. I'll probably have to run off and grab a whiskey and join you. I know that's typically it's weird to think about drinking whiskey for what we're talking about because it's Passover, second Passover.
Yep.
And so yeah, right off the bat, we'll level with everybody here because first thing we like to do is a brief introduction. Not a lot to talk about on this particular topic. We've covered Passover pretty extensively a couple of times already. There are a few really interesting, notable things that are found in some rabbinic texts concerning Passover, the second Passover. But for the most part, it is Passover 2.0. Oh man, we should have titled it that. I'm an idiot.
Pesach 2.0.
Yeah. And there's some symbolism in that, obviously, when you have a second Passover. Like we're gonna talk about a little bit about the symbolism, the symbology, the symbolism of having two Passovers.
Points if you catch that reference.
Yeah. Brownie points if you catch that reference. Drop it in the comments. Okay, so why don't you kick us off while I stop talking?
Well, so for many, this may be something that they're unfamiliar with. Okay. And it's not that it's not in the Bible. It actually is in the Bible. But as neglected as the Old Testament can often be, and especially the Torah, right? In the Christian church, we tend to stick to the parts of the Bible that we can relate to the New Testament or find some way to tie Jesus in there. And so there are parts of the Torah, and really, it is true, the rest of the Old Testament, they go relatively untouched and forgotten by many. But we find this in Numbers chapter 9,
yes,
starting in verse 6 and going on to verse 12, I believe, is where we find the stipulations, right? The Israelites come to Moses and they're like, hey, so some of us had to deal with a corpse, right? And so we were impure during the time of Pesach, so we couldn't actually engage in the Passover, right? Because we were in a time of impurity. We could not go and offer this sacrifice.
Yep,
now
can't eat it, can't offer it.
I gotta say, I do find it fascinating that we did both of those in the same week. Like we literally just we did a special touching on Nida, right?
Yeah, we did.
And covering in part the subject of corpse contamination. And so now we're talking about the second Passover, which was established because of this kind of impurity. And so they come to Moses. We weren't able to observe the Passover. What do we do? Are we just left out of that? Are you just if you happen to not be able to celebrate the Passover, are you just cut off from that practice?
I think the wording is the men ask them, why must we be diminished? Right. Hey, what's the deal? Like, why do we? Is it just we're SOL? We just got to deal with it, or what's up? Like,
I think that's something worth noting here too, is that there is an eagerness and an anxiousness towards celebrating the Passover, right? They're clearly not looking at this as something that they had to do. This was something that they got to do. And now they're raising the question because it seems like they might not get to do it.
Yeah. And that's something to consider when we talk about this, these kind of things. A foreign concept to many Christians is the idea that one gets to do Torah. And we hear this a lot because, the knee-jerk Christian reaction is, why would you want to? Or like, why would you put yourself back under the bondage of the Torah, the law? And there's this mindset, right, that it's just this really ugly thing that Christians wish that didn't fully exist, in their Bibles. It's kind of like the redheaded stepchild of all of their books in the Bible. they really would rather ignore it, especially books like the Book of Numbers or Leviticus, where it's just full of stuff. Except when it comes to Leviticus 18:19. For some reason, Christians really like that one passage out of the entire book. But this knee-jerk reaction is very much just so like, we've been free from that. Why would you? Well, that's the mindset, right? We are free from that. So why would you even want to? Isn't that so burdensome? Isn't it just more than you can handle? 613 laws. That's a lot. That's the mindset. That's not the mindset of the Jew. The Jewish people were liberated from Egypt so that they could do Torah. And so their mindset is, we get to do these things because we're no longer under the bondage of slavery belonging to somebody else. We're God's people. So we get to do the things that God wants us to do. And so and you and I have had many experience talking about this with other Jewish men. They are constantly looking for opportunities to fulfill more mitzvahs.
Yes.
Mitzvah being the Hebrew word for commandment, by the way.
The part of the motivation, I can't speak for for every Jew. I really can only speak for one particular Hasidic Jew that I know. But part of the motivation for constantly looking for an opportunity to fulfill a mitzvah, right, is because one more mitzvah might be all it takes to bring Mashiach, right? The understanding, the teaching is that the balance is shifting so much constantly, right, between acts of obedience and acts of disobedience, right, between good and evil. Here the balance is in such a shift that at any given point it might just take one more to bring the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so there's this constant idea of looking for that one more, right, that you might be able to complete. And I personally think that's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, the Chesed mindset is a good mindset. It's very much in the spirit of like Yeshua's very heart.
Yeah, you might be able to. Any Christian might be able to disagree with it on practicality, but especially on an emotional level and on a level of the heart, I don't understand how you could come to a point of disagreeing with it.
And so these men come before Moses and Aaron, and they're like, hey, we didn't get to do it. And here's the thing, too. What they're talking about specifically is not the holiday.
It's not sacrifice.
It's not even the Seder. Is that they can do a Seder without the Passover offering itself. They just can't eat the actual offering because they're in a state of impurity. But they're more than, they're still keeping the holiday, still keeping the 7 days of unleavened bread. They're doing all of that. And yeah, you're exactly right. It's the actual offering itself. Why is it important to them that they eat the offering?
Well, this is where we get into some of the nitty-gritty of the offering here, and this is one of my favorite subjects to confuse people on, because there are so many assumptions made about not just the Passover, but the sacrificial system in general, right? And so there's this understanding in Christianity that Jesus was the one final sin sacrifice who served as the Paschal lamb, symbolically. And then it's like, okay, so which one was it then, right? Was he the Paschal lamb or was he a sin sacrifice? Because those are not the same thing, right? The Paschal lamb is a peace offering, right? That's the peace offering in particular is considered table fellowship with God, right?
Yes.
It's the whole family sitting down at the table together to eat, right? Because you take your portion, and then there's the portion for the priests, and then there's Hashem's portion, and so everybody is eating from the same dinner.
Yeah, the same meal.
Right. Everybody is sharing this meal together, and so hence it's It's table fellowship with God. This is something that brings you close to God, right? And that's the idea. This is, this is korban, right? That's what that's what that means. That which draws near. And so that's why it's coveted, right? That's why it's desired. That's why you wouldn't want to miss out on it. This is not an obligation that you have to, carry out against your will. This is something you get to do. You get to have table fellowship with God. And so the fact that God then offered a means of having this kind of fellowship a second time around with those who were unable to make dinner time, so to speak.
And that's when it comes down to this particular offering, like this mindset, right? I want to do the Passover because I want to have table fellowship with God. That's another thing about this offering is, I want to stress this, is that this is not an offering that you are forced to bring, a free will offering, a peace offering. And so it really is I'm doing this because I get to, or because I want to. So it's a big deal. And, of course, there's the idea that it also harkens back to the Passover, right? So there's a lot of importance to the Jewish mind on the holiday as a whole. But what I find interesting, particularly about Pesach Sheni, is that it's the only holiday where you get a second chance, which I find incredibly interesting. So you could say that this holiday has a second coming, for lack of a better terminology.
So it's not the only one where you get a second chance. It's the only one that's outlined in the written Torah where you get a second chance. But yeah, but it's interesting though that both of the holidays where you do get a second chance to celebrate that holiday, right? Both of them are the week-long festivals that are followed by an eighth day, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So you have Pesach, and then a month later you have Pesach Sheni, right? You have Second Passover, and then later on in the year you have Sukkot, and then later on in the year, even still, you have Hanukkah, which is like a second chance at Sukkot.
That is true.
Which is more or less that's why it was established, was because they weren't able to celebrate Sukkot because they were in the middle of a war campaign.
And it's exactly like in the middle of the year, like exactly halfway point from Sukkot.
Yep.
Which is interesting. Another interesting portion of this particular holiday, though, in the written Torah, which I think is worth pointing out, is there's a few times, I can't remember how many times, in fact, it's probably worth looking up, but there's only a few times where you see this phrase. The phrase I'm talking about particularly is in chapter 9 of Numbers, verse 14. If an outsider living among you would celebrate Passover to Hashem according to the requirement, he should do so. There will be for you the same law for the outsider and to the native of the land. The TLV puts outsider, the Hebrew is ger, right? So the ger that lives among you, the ger toshav, which is very interesting. So there's only a few times where you see this idea of there's one law between you and the stranger who resides among you, and this holiday is one of the times in which it shows up. And the Or HaChaim actually has an interesting thing to say about that. Now, keeping in mind, I'm going to read from the Or HaChaim. That way you guys can just sort of have what is actually said and not, a sort of interpretation. But keeping in mind now to a Orthodox Jew ever since the Talmudic times, the word ger went from meaning stranger to meaning proselyte or convert or full convert. And so some of this is being looked at from that perspective, and so some of this commentary is written in that manner. But let's see. Okay, yeah. We need to understand the verse as it is written, with the beginning phrase. Additionally, why does the verse need to repeat itself after saying that he shall make a Pesach offering? By saying, so shall he do. Actually, that's the wrong place to start. That's actually the differing opinion. So what Or HaChaim tends to do is he'll write in like an opinion, and then he's like, okay, here's why I disagree with this opinion. Yeah, you know what? It would be better to. It's actually, I'm realizing now it's like 3 pages of commentary. It would be better to sort of summarize. So I'm trying to look through his summary of this. And for those of you who have the physical, you can. I think Or HaChaim is available on Safaria, so you can look it up for yourself to double check. For those of you, if you have a physical copy, it's on page 177 of the 7th volume. So if you're looking for the exact reference. In its commentary on chapter 9, verse 14. But essentially what he's saying here is that there's this idea, right? Like what is a ger allowed to say? What is a ger allowed to do? Or a convert? Is a convert allowed to say certain blessings like the God of our forefathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Is he allowed to say our forefathers if he's a proselyte? And that's a legitimate question, because it's like, okay, well, you know, he's not actually, and he doesn't have ancestry to Judaism, and so it's not proper for him to say that. And that's one opinion. And in his opinion here, he believes that that's not the right opinion. And now modern halakhic Judaism teaches that once you become a full convert, you are a Jew through and through by every meaning of the word. And so there's no question here. But obviously, you know, this was something that was brought up in ancient literature. And he uses this as the proof to basically say, look, you know, a convert, one would easily and rightfully assume that a convert should not and has no obligation to keep the Passover, because none of his ancestors or he himself in any way is connected to the actual Passover. Right? So this is the building of the conversation. So essentially like, hey, yeah, you're a full convert, you're a full Jew, but your ancestors weren't part of the Passover. You didn't get passed over, so you're not obligated to keep the Passover offering to do any of that. You can do everything else as though you're a full Jew, but not the Passover, because you're technically, you have no ancestry. And this, he says, this passage proves that no, in fact, essentially his soul was there, in spirit. More or less, like when he becomes a convert, is as though his soul was there being passed over, because of the way it words that, you know, it's to be the same regulation. And it says this, and one of the few times it does pop up right after the Pesach Sheni portion, which is the second Passover portion. And why not the first Passover portion? And he talks about that too. Essentially, the reasoning is, well, one could easily assume that he's okay to keep the first Passover, but as a proselyte, he's not obligated or okay to keep the second Passover if he misses the first one. And to which they say, no. The reason it's included in the second Passover passage is because even though that's the lesser holiday, it shows the precedence of the convert, how, you know, even if he's a convert, he's also just as equally obligated to perform even the second Passover if he missed the first one. So he's treated as a total equal, basically. The point I'm trying to get at in a really roundabout way, again, it's like 4 or 5 pages of commentary, is that the convert is a full convert in every way, shape, or form of the word. Now, of course, we here at Alternate Media, we tend to interpret the word ger as stranger, like a ger toshav. And so, you know, we would easily say, well, yeah, as gerim, as someone who's a non-Jew, you're, you know, once you've been delivered, once you've been pulled out of your own personal exodus and had your own spiritual Passover, the whole thing applies to you as though you were there. And rabbinic literature reflects that once you become a full convert, and there's actually a debate on what constitutes as a full convert. Do you have to just be circumcised, or do you just a mikvah? There's a whole discussion on that because women can't obviously get a circumcision, so maybe a mikvah is perfectly fine even for those who don't get a circumcision. Blah blah blah. There's a whole conversation. So even with that being said, there's a lot there to it. But once you've made your commitment and you've made your conversion, whether it's a quote unquote conversion or a literal full conversion, you are a Jew through and through. That's kind of the idea that I'm getting at. That was a really long-winded piece. Unfortunately, so I really love the Or HaChaim commentary, and I read it and I think, wow, it's a really good nugget of information. And then as I'm regurgitating, I'm realizing it was actually a lot of information. But really good. If you guys have never heard of the Or HaChaim, I do highly recommend this. It's a Chumash. It's a commentary on the 5 books. I think it's actually on sale right now. It's 26% off. So it's like 100 and something. It's a little expensive still, but very much one of my favorite Chumash commentaries that I've read is this one. I absolutely love this one. I know you have a copy, so you can vouch.
Oh,
yes. It's a great commentary, which is why I keep it right here in the low center portion, because I love it.
Hey, me too.
Yeah, hey. So that being said, so I feel like I've talked enough about that particularly, and then if you want to go into like the whole God of second chances thing, I think I'm going to grab a whiskey.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I was actually I was reading some of what Safari has got to say on this passage. Yeah, which a lot of it is just technical unraveling of the text. Read a little bit of Targum Jonathan on it also. Again, it's more or less the same.
I do have some more really cool nuggets from other commentaries. Actually, when I come back, we'll talk them over. I got a couple things highlighted up here.
Absolutely. One of the things that is brought up and how it's different, right? One of the things in how Pesach Sheni is different is that it actually is only a 1-day thing, right? The 7 days of eating matzah do not follow Pesach Sheni. And there's a bit of discussion on that in the Jerusalem Talmud. At least, that's what I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's discussion on that elsewhere too, even in the Babylonian Talmud. But so there are differences. The similarities are very particular. They're very specified in this aspect. So to leave no bone broken on the Paschal lamb for the second time, right? This is a prohibitive command. It's the command not to break any of its bones. Whereas, to eat it until morning, this is something that's very specifically repeated about this particular festival, is that you are to leave none of it till morning. And that actually is a positive command. This is something that the Torah is saying you should do. And so these are the similarities that we see, but we don't see the positive command to eat matzah for 7 days tied to this. Right? That's one way that it's different. And I feel like a lot of us miss that with Pesach. A lot of us think, a lot of people think that what you're supposed to do is abstain from, chametz, right? That's the goal, is just to avoid eating chametz. That is not the goal. That is part of it. Yes, you are prohibited from eating chametz, but the other part of it is an actual proactive command. It is that you are specifically to feast on matzah for 7 days. So it's not just gluten-free week. Yeah, that's a joke that we kind of throw around here and there, is that it's gluten-free week, but that's really not the case. It is a week in which you are supposed to be feasting on matzah, but that's what's different here about Pesach Sheni, is that we don't see that attached to this particular holiday. But to kind of circle around to this being a time of second chances, and I think that this is kind of a beautiful aspect of this too, is that even on Pesach Sheni, you would still abstain from the Tachnun, right?
Yep.
The prayers of supplication. And I think that goes beautifully with the meaning of the holiday in and of itself, right? So well, this is not the only meaning of the holiday, but what the rabbis have even derived from this is that this really makes a huge statement about second chances, and that the God that we serve is the God of second chances, because we're even given a second chance at observing the Passover should we be unable to observe it its first time around. And they even, it's funny, I was reading a Chabad article today about this, and yeah, they even tied that as being directly relevant to that which is brought on by repentance, right? That the idea of second chances is not just, the abstract of idea of second chances, but that it is specifically the second chances that we can see brought on by repentance.
I guess you're done too now. All right, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I had a thought and an addition, and I just lost it. It's fine. Must not been too important. It'll come back to me later on, probably in the after part, as that's usually how this works.
Yep. So that's the thing, you guys. When you're missing out on the after part, as you're missing out on the stuff that we accidentally remember in after the show that we forgot during the show,
and we don't record that, so it just goes away when it's, unless you were there, it just goes away.
Or even if we happen to have over prepared for the episode, which oftentimes we do, there's no chill, dude. There's no in between. There's no perfect amount of preparation. We either don't prepare at all and just wing it, or we over prepare entirely, and then so there's half of the notes that we've both got that get completely undiscussed, and we discuss those in the after part, as so you miss out on that too.
So so this is an article I had pulled up on Pesach Sheni, and this is an interesting piece of Mishnah that I was not aware of, because there's traditions to the holidays, right? The holidays, Passover, obviously happened Passover, and then Shavuot is traditionally the day that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, so 50 days later. And so some of the holidays have these coinciding events that are traditionally linked. This one, it was revealed that the Jews were given a second chance to bring the Paschal offering, specifically on the 14th, because that was the day the Jews still had leftover matzah from when they left Egypt on Pesach. After eating that last bit that night, the Jews complained to God, saying, "What then shall we eat?" And it was on that day that the manna began to fall. So after Pesach Sheni is when manna is first introduced, traditionally. So the miracle of the desert is the link with the Pesach Sheni, the bread from heaven, the second coming. There's so many parallels.
Right.
I mean, you can't. There's no denying it. And it's these tiny little details that, because, and I'm gonna throw some shade, because Christians don't spend a lot of time in the Torah at all. This is details that they miss because they're not familiar with the work. They don't usually read from it. They spend most of their time in the last third of the book. And so, there are things that aren't exactly talked about in the New Testament that you could make a parallel on your own just from reading the Tanakh. So, but yeah, So this, and I have another piece here. Let's see. Okay, there's an interesting tradition here. Therefore, we specifically eat matzah on the 14th day. This is for Pesach Sheni, and we wish to avoid making a custom to eat it specifically then. He writes, this is especially true in light of the Jerusalem Talmud's statement that if the Mashiach will come between the first and second Passover, then all Jews will have the opportunity to bring the Pesach offering on the second Passover.
Hmm.
Since the second Passover could be an actual holiday for all Jews, then we would all be obligated to eat the matzah. We don't want to have a custom to eat matzah, which gives an impression that we're adding a different observance. So essentially, that's part of a larger conversation. But yeah, essentially, just in case Mashiach comes between the two Passovers, that second Passover suddenly becomes a major holiday, which is, I think, very, very... again, there's, Mashiach ben Yosef is sort of a minor role of Mashiach. Mashiach ben David is a major role. And Passover, original Passover, is a major holiday, and Pesach Sheni is a lesser holiday. And so there's kind of like this flip, from our perspective, which I find very interesting. I mean, really, the parallels, we could go all day with this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny. I'm going through bits of the Talmud right now, and a lot of it is repetitive. Even from different parts. It's they're citing another rabbi for some other reason pertaining to some other discussion. But the content itself is very similar. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, but none of it really pertaining to what we're talking about tonight. It's more so, marking
After Pardes material.
Yeah, this would be after Pardes material and stuff. I mean, a lot of the differences between, the first and second Passover, and why certain things are phrased this way, why it says, that you are to eat matzah in your dwelling and not just that you are to eat matzah. Why does it have to say in your dwelling there? That they derive meaning from, okay, so if there is no temple, so you can't offer the Paschal lamb, you're not then released from eating matzah, right? That's why it says in your dwelling, is that's a point of separation.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting. There's a lot of conversations that are happening in other materials surrounding this whole thing. But definitely the bits and pieces that I definitely wanted to hit on, is the fact that the Ger Toshav is brought up, right, in this particular verse section, illustrating the equality of the convert, quote unquote. So that to me is one of the bigger things, because there are some opinions out there that even if you're a full convert, you're still not technically an equal, where that is currently not the halakhic position of Judaism. But in the times during the Talmud, this was very much still something that was in discussion. Because Shammai was more or less of the opinion that no, a convert will never be an equal, whereas Hillel, both of his rabbis that raised him were both converts, and so he was a lot more friendly to converts than Shammai was. So there's a little bit of background for you as to why some things are the way that they are between the two of them. But yeah, it was very much still a thing that was in discussion at the time, because it was largely undecided at the time, which is why these conversations are important, to see the evolution of halacha as it goes, so that you understand why Jewish history is what it is today, why it's become what it has been over the years through the discussions that's happened. Jewish history is as rich, if not richer, than church history. So yeah, I'd say the only difference is really that church history is full of philosophers trying to read a document that they are untrained in, whereas Jewish history is millions of lawyers that are trained in this particular document. So they're having really, really advanced conversations about a document they already fully understand. So It's a different animal entirely, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I'm not very humble about it right now, but it's my opinion. So, I think we've covered what we wanted to. Let's take some questions.
Yes, questions.
Questions, comments, sarcastic remarks. Let's
say we've got a pretty active chat tonight, so I'm excited to see what comes about. Spirit Wars, I'm actually very, very curious to know how you're liking that Four Roses. All of the 90s kids.
Yep. I haven't had Bushmills in a while. Very good. I love nothing like a good old-fashioned Bushmills. Let's see. There's a couple of questions. I think we already touched on one. I answered one in the chat.
Glad you like it.
Okay, so if we celebrated the first one, we are not obligated to celebrate the second one, correct? Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Stated reason for this. I was going to say the stated reason for this is specifically for those who did not get to celebrate the first one.
Yeah. Now, I do believe that in certain Orthodox communities, you will see that just about every family will have like a minor Seder meal on this day. But it's not like I don't believe they treat it like a Yom Tov. At least I don't believe that they do. I could be wrong. I'm not entirely familiar with it, but a lot of families will still have the second Passover Seder. They just won't. It won't be a full-blown holiday. It'll be like just a remembrance of the Pesach Sheni. Again, because they want to get to do these things, right? So they're constantly looking for opportunity to keep mitzvahs, even if they're not obligated to keep a mitzvah. As long as it's not prohibited, they're likely going to partake. Never had anything with... Sorry, sir. Hope I don't... Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Don't treat it like a wine. Treat it like
a whiskey.
Yeah, like a whiskey.
Like a whiskey. Let's see.
I'm looking through the chat right now to see.
Yeah, I was kind of monitoring it the whole time. We got some statements in here that are very niche to us. We got a Saint McBucko reference in here from the debate night.
Yeah, that was. I know the part that he's talking about too, and that I gotta say is probably one of my favorite parts of the debate when rewatching it, just because the contrast and then the inconsistency of the reasoning became very apparent when the question was asked.
Which question?
It's the idea, right? Because we were talking about Passover protocol at the time,
right? And
so whether or not Jesus is the lamb or the bread, right? Because he was I was right. I was raising a point about the Talmudic ruling of the afikomen being used in place of the lamb when there couldn't be any lamb at the Passover, right? And pointing out this is why he held up the bread, right? We get no indication at all anywhere that there was lamb present at the table, right? The text literally never says it, and if we're to understand that he is the Paschal Lamb, right, then he should have held up lamb to say, "This is my body broken for you," right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that. He holds up bread, and so then it was like, okay, so which one is he then? Is he the bread or the lamb? And then he tried to make a reason as to why it's both. And yeah, there are parts where he is referred to as the bread, but that's not relative to Passover. It's not really relevant to any particular holiday, and the statement that he was making was very specific to the holiday at hand.
I was gonna say, yes, he's both, but that ignores your question.
Right. Each analogy within its own context. You can't just take the analogies and say, well, yeah, he's both now, because, like, no, we're talking about a particular context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you missed essentially what your question was trying to get at, more or less. When is the next debate?
It's a good question.
That's a great question. I don't know. We don't have anything planned currently.
I don't know. I jokingly, because I follow a certain page on Facebook that, don't ask me why I do this. Right? You either glutton for punishment, or I just look for reasons to stoke the fire. But I follow a page that is full of like Reformed theology and Calvinism. And so, a discussion got started about how basically nobody can beat James White in a debate, right? It's just impossible. It's never happened. I'm like, well, not Tovius Singer. Who am I thinking of? William Lane Craig. I don't know how I got those two confused, because they debated each other. Tovia Singer and William Lane Craig debated each other. William Lane Craig kind of gave him a pretty good run for his money at the last debate that I watched between them. Anthony Buzzard kind of rocked his world. I just rattled off a few, and then I was like, yeah, and Will from the Church Split is giving him a pretty hard time on Twitter right now. And somebody made a comment about Will and James White debating, and I was instantly like, alternate media will host. We will moderate this debate. So I don't know. I haven't approached Will about it, but I think it would be I think that would be pretty awesome to watch.
Yeah. I wonder if he'd be willing. So what are our opinion on the Noahide laws? That is actually, we are planning on doing an episode about the Noahides.
Yep.
But we're planning on doing an episode about the Noahides with an Orthodox Hasidic Jew as a guest on the show to talk about it.
Yes.
So that way you don't just hear it from us, but we can also, you can hear it from the horse's mouth, more or less. Get the Jewish opinion of things. We're going to go over like what they are, the basics of them, where they came about, why, and how we feel about it. It'll be a discussion. So someone is asking, what is a Noahide law? Real quick, just before we answer this question, there are 7 called the Noahide laws, which Orthodox Judaism in Talmudic times has ruled that these are the laws that are obligated.
They're the 7 laws which are given to the nations is more or less how that would be, and that particular choice of wording, that plays a part in my thoughts, my personal thoughts on the Noahide laws. Essentially the idea is that the 7 Noahide laws were given to the world at large, whereas the Torah was very specifically given to Israel, right? And so the 7 Noahide laws, I used to know them all by heart.
I got them up.
Yeah, but they, so one of them is definitely not to murder, right?
Yeah, I got them pulled up. I'll just
go ahead and read them off.
First one, not to worship idols, not to curse God, not to commit murder, not to commit adultery or sexual immorality, not to steal, not to eat the flesh torn from a living animal, and to establish courts of justice. Those are your 7.
Yep. The one that you read is not to curse God. The rendering of that I'm familiar with is not to, how was it worded? It was essentially not to confuse or to confound his unity.
Kileat Hashem. Blasphemy is a good, so it's the charge specifically of blasphemy, which according to the Sanhedrin is to speak the holy name out loud.
Right. And so, yeah, essentially, aside from the prohibition against idolatry, and the prohibition against cursing Hashem, a lot of it is really just the human default setting. It's these are practices that can be observed in literally every culture of humanity. You'd have to go pretty far and pretty deep into completely untouched territory to find a society of human beings that doesn't abide by at least the majority of these 7.
Yeah, and they're called Noahides not because they were like you can't find this list in the Torah given to Noah specifically. They're sort of exegetically pulled out of the book of Genesis between Adam and Noah.
Yeah.
And so
there's an idea of, and I think even it may be midrashic. I know it's Talmudic for sure. That Adam was given the 7 Noahides initially. Now there is a slight difference between the 7 that Adam was given and what was relayed to Noah, and that's an important difference in its own right.
Right. So when it comes to the 7, however, it's worth noting. So there's a couple of things, and this is to answer the question, like, what do we think? I'm not in huge favor of them. One, when you it's a Talmudic invention. I'm not against the Talmud. All right. First of all, everyone should know, if you've been on this channel for any length of time, the Talmud is largely a misunderstood document. I'm not against it, but Talmud is not what we call oral tradition. It's case law. Mishnah is oral tradition. That's the oral Torah, is the Mishnah. The 7 Noahide laws are not in the Mishnah. They don't exist in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah predates the Talmud by a couple hundred years. And the Mishnah and Gemara together don't have this anywhere, and so it is something that is a rabbinic sort of mandated invention. And I actually pulled this comment up because this is essentially what it is. This is a good observation. We've actually made this observation a couple of times because during the days of the apostles, the 7 Noahide laws didn't yet exist. And there's no evidence to suggest that the rabbinate at the time were enforcing this 7 Noahide thing for all the Gentile nations. And in fact, there's a lot more evidence to see that supports that during the time of the 1st century, proselytism was much more common. And this is why Yeshua makes a statement like, you travel across seas to grab one proselyte and make him closer to a son of hell than a son of heaven. Like, essentially, the idea being that proselytism is actually sort of what seems to be preferred rather than just, hey, if you're a Gentile, as long as you're a good person, you're all right. So the 4, that are given in Acts is sort of like the apostles' version of trying to come up with a sort of 7 laws of the Noahides. The difference between the 4 is the conclusion statement at the end of the 4 is the whole point is you're going to eventually learn to keep Torah. Verse 21 in Acts 15. The reason I don't particularly like the 7 Noahides is because that's not the conclusion statement in the Talmud. In fact, the concluding statement in the Talmud about the 7 Noahide laws is it's meant to be very condemning. Instead of being like, hey, keep these 7, join us in the synagogue, and eventually you'll learn. That's the point of the 4 given in Acts. The point of the 7 was more like, the nation of Israel was given 613 laws, and the nations of the world were only given 7, and they can't even keep that much. And that's the theme of the 7. It's like here's the basic laws for all humanity, and they suck. Humanity is so bad they can't even keep 7, and we're doing just fine with our 613. It's this very condemning sort of like. It doesn't originally show up as, hey, this is all you need to do in order to sort of get in. It's more or less like, whether you're a Jew or not, this is what it takes to be a decent human being, and you can't even do that much. Right. And then it becomes the 7 Noahide laws much later on, where it becomes sort of like a halachic thing. And that's my opinion. I'm allowed to have that.
I'm in full agreement with you on everything that you've said. I'm going to reserve my full thoughts on it and
Mhm.
my primary point of disagreement on it for the actual episode, because I do want to hear an honest answer on
Yes.
that, because
Same.
it's a point of inherent internal contradiction of thought.
Yeah, no, I'm
And
saving a lot for the actual episode. That is a very watered down fire hose version of sort of my feelings, because I was asked,
yeah,
and I feel like I'll give you a quick. There's your quick like teaser for the episode. There you go.
right, there you go.
Um,
We have a good question here. And we have done a bit of a video touching like a little bit on this subject because it was a little bit relevant. Because we did an episode briefly touching on demonology. I think we should do a 2.0 on that, because
should.
there really is a lot more to that. But yeah, definitely, I would definitely love to do a video on the differences between angelology in Judaism and how its function is in Christianity, because that's a fascinating subject in and of itself.
Yeah, I would say, I think Joshua, you're definitely in the Discord. I think drop it in the chat for the suggestions. That way we remember to write it down in our
Yeah,
suggestions
the
book.
patron requests.
Man, because I tell you, we have like I think 210 suggestions currently written.
Yep.
And we're just taking them one at a time.
Yep.
There's only
We've
so
got our
many
work
weeks
cut
in it.
out for us for quite a while. You guys have given us a lot of content that
Oh
that
yeah.
we've got to make, and it's awesome though.
Well, what's crazy is it's actually not a lot. It's like 210. It's not a lot, but we only do one episode a week, so
Right.
it will take us, like 4 years to get to it all. That is unless our support suddenly ramps up, and then we can replace all of our staff's income to make this a daily thing, and then we can cover a whole lot of content every single day, and that would
Yep.
be ideal. But we're, once a week right now is all we can afford to do.
Yep. One day.
But I think, let me see here. I think we're good.
Yeah, we're right on the hour mark anyway, so we're within the time.
Yeah. So here, let me put up this one. After parties in the Discord. For those of you who are supporters at any tier, any level, if you want to be a supporter, you want to support the ministry, membership starts at $1, and you get access to everything, early access to certain stuff. I got a couple things that are like right now only available for Patreons exclusively. And then you can join us in the after parties. You can 1v1 us, talk to us one-on-one, put us in the lion's den. You can roast us. You can sit there and utter in complete awkward silence with us, whatever it is you want to do. But that's your time with us. So yeah, we're chilling, and that's where we're headed. So
Yep. We always be going there after we leave here.
Yeah, we always usually chill out there for at least an hour. Sometimes much longer. It just depends.
Yeah, sometimes we go pretty late, yo. So
sometimes it gets dumb, where it's like 3 a.m, and I'm like, why am I still here?
No, we love it though. I always enjoy it. It's really what it is we end up talking well beyond our ability or capacity to be coherent because of sleepiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sleep overpowers our desire for discussion.
Cool. Well, all right. We've fairly warned everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We really appreciate all you guys' support. And yeah, you got.
You say hit, bless the like button, and you forgot to do the In Nomine Patri et Filii, the bell.
Yeah, well, not the bell. It's In Nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, the subscribe button.
The subscribe button, yes.
And you got to make sure you got to do that, right? So you take your mouse and scroll over to the subscribe button, and you have to say In Nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, and then you can click it. Otherwise, it won't work. You just sit there and you click it. If you don't bless it correctly, it won't go through. So.
Oh, yeah, but yeah, do that, and then if you feel so inclined, Become a patron supporter. Come and join us in the after party. We love having newcomers. We love the discussion. We have such a great group that bring some of the most awesome questions. It's always good for discussion. So other than that, I'm going to say...
Oh,
wait.
what?
I mentioned him. Our patron supporters. We got to do the shout out.
Oh, yep. Let me. Boom.
Nope. Don't like that.
Right there.
That is the way.
Let me get rid of the banners real quick. Oh wow, it just cuts off the top. I gotta fix that. Whatever. Totally fine. Yeah, once again, special shout out to all of our top tier Patreon supporters. You guys absolutely rock. Can't do this without you. Yeah, you got anything else to say? I think our music stopped. Nope, it's still playing. Yep. Yeah, you got anything else before we take off?
Nope. I'm ready to head over and chill with the peeps, yo.
Yeah, me too. All right, I'll see you in the Discord. L'chaim.
L'chaim.